Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the New American Media Podcast. It's your host, Greg Gala here. New location, sitting in the sunroom of my house today. It is summertime. Today's guest, we have all the way from sunny Miami, Florida, Anastasiya Shekhtman.
Hi.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, thank you for joining us. I met Anastasiya at the All In Summit down in Miami, hosted by one of the podcasts that we both like, the All In podcast with Jason and the rest of the team, Chamath, David Sachs, David Friedberg. So it was a great time, and it was great getting to know you.
Likewise.
A little thing I'll set up here. Anastasiya works in Web3. They have a new startup called Ethereal, and I'll let you talk a little bit more about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. We're building Ethereal. Ethereal is a metaverse layer for our current web that lets content consumers interact with each other anywhere they go online. So we're basically taking the web that wasn't designed for human interaction and we're making it social.
That's amazing. Tell me a little bit about how it kind of works. I know I've seen the pitch deck and some of the slides. If you just want to talk about, does it work through your browser? Can it work on a mobile device? Those types of things. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So our long-term vision is to be able to let anyone connect with someone like-minded anytime they want. And so eventually it'll work on mobile and basically anywhere that humans are. But our initial product is a Chrome extension. So all you have to do is download the browser extension. You'd be able to, connect with people based on like content that you're browsing when you're on desktop. So that's kind of where we're starting. So, if you're watching a YouTube video, if you're browsing for NFT projects in OpenSea, or even if you're shopping, you can basically allow anything that you already love to do to connect you with people who share your interests.
That's great. I think that's amazing. What I've seen today with a lot of Web3 projects is that they are a bit too far into the future. By creating something like a Chrome extension and then adding product layers on top of it, as you see customer response and those kind of things, I think is a great start. I think that is the way to bridge the divide from Web 2 to Web 3. So I'm very bullish on the company. I think it's great. But let's talk about you. Tell me a little bit about yourself, how you came to the United States, becoming a new American in this country, where you're from, and a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually immigrated to the United States when I was only 4 years old. So a lot of what I'll probably talk about is something that I realized in retrospect, just because I was so young when I actually did move here. But after giving it a lot of thought, and especially recently with just kind of analyzing the trajectory that my life's taken, and kind of thinking about why I'm building Ethereal. I think I realized that a lot of it does go back to like being a child and having so much of my childhood sort of formed by that experience of, also sort of being like bridging two different worlds. So the world of like my Ukrainian heritage and my Ukrainian culture, as well as that of, being a US immigrant. And I think, what I realized is that when I was very young and, still kind of learning the language, it was very difficult for me to like truly feel belonging. And it was a little bit more complicated than, just kind of having a hard time, like maybe fitting in with my American peers in school. Because I moved to a place where there was also Ukrainian culture as well. And so I was always either interacting with these like Ukrainian children who were a lot more growing up, were like a lot more sort of still plugged into their culture than I was, and American ones who had no idea of like why, you know, my family traditions were so different and why my food at Thanksgiving didn't really make sense to them and was weird. So I think I was constantly sort of like trying to bridge these two worlds, neither of which I fully sort of fit into. And my first experience is like genuinely finding true belonging and genuine connection was actually with art, and with literature. You know, I would read stories or books and I would stumble upon certain lines, or certain works where I just like had such powerful resonance with what I found, that I'd never experienced before in my life. And so I really kind of, you know, fell in love with art and fell in love with, you know, consuming sort of all sorts of different works in any medium I could imagine. And I think falling in love with like art in different formats at such a young age, definitely propelled me to like pursue my own creative pursuits. And so that began with, you know, pursuing drawing and art and writing stories. But I think because I was so passionate about, you know, using those mediums to like connect with people, no medium was ever fully satisfying to me because, you know, I realized even if you succeed at writing an amazing work of fiction, you won't know how much it resonated with people, maybe ever, because a lot of books, you know, kind of take off after the creator actually has passed away. And so I never was able to like, you know, find those mediums to be truly gratifying in like actually, you know, feeling the gratification of connecting, with individuals, you know, across time and space. And so I ended up kind of just, you know, picking up different artistic mediums, always in pursuit of something that was more interactive. So I picked up YouTube because I thought, hey, YouTube is a medium that actually allows you to like directly have a relationship with your audience. And you can actually, you know, hear and see the response that your content, you know, actually has on the people that watch it. But of course, that wasn't, you know, it wasn't enough for me either because I was also sort of in this position where I would like see the response from my audience and I would see that, you know, my subscribers were feeling really isolated in their own lives. And so I thought, hey, you know, there must be better ways to actually bring people together. And so I ended up kind of, you know, pursuing the trajectory of product design, because I realized, you know, technology is actually a way to, you know, bring people together and actually give them the tools to enable them to pursue, you know, connection in their own lives without having to sort of, you know, be kind of, at the mercy of someone else, you know, kind of arranging things for them.
No, that definitely makes a lot of sense. That's amazing. So tell me, you came to the US when you were 4 years old from Ukraine, uh, and you settled, I'm guessing, there in South Florida.
No, actually, I've spent most of my life in Pennsylvania, so very,
Oh,
very different.
got it, got it, got it. Um, so I guess growing up at that age, what was one, I would say, kind of like event or something your parents talked about that kind of pushed you to be this artistic person and go into the entrepreneurship of the arts, I should say, and
Mhm.
then into product design?
Well, that's an interesting question. Honestly, I some my whole family definitely is very creative in different ways, but I think because of what my parents went through, you know, coming from Ukraine where there just weren't many opportunities at all, and kind of, you know, seeing what they've gone through in order to like bring my sisters and I to the United States in pursuit of better opportunities. Um, you know, I think we never actually, my parents never necessarily encouraged creative pursuits. I think a lot of, immigrants and children of immigrants kind of know that pressure where like your family's gone through so much in order to give you better opportunities that you're sort of, there is this sort of underlying pressure to, kind of go, more traditional route that's
Right.
like,
Be a
hiding
doctor, be a
that.
lawyer, engineer, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely. So, I mean, they never discouraged the creative pursuits. I think they always wanted us to be happy, but I think there was always, that sort of pressure of like, having to make a lot of money after school. And so, yeah, I don't think I always kind of struggled with that aspect because a lot of what I naturally gravitated to never really, had such potential for being like a high paying gig. Like I when I was young, I was interested in fashions, so I considered being a fashion designer. I considered being an artist, a writer, none of which are traditionally, very profitable trajectories. So I think also in the mix, I always had like, oh, maybe I'll be a computer programmer because my dad was an engineer. So there was this sort of like always this sort of combination of like the more creative pursuits with something a little bit more technical as well. And as I got older, I think I was very interested in the concept of like becoming a creative director because that was something where, it's a pretty high up position of leadership where, they tend to, make a lot more money while, excelling in a creative field. So I think that was always something I was interested in. And so that was sort of, I guess, like one of the things that pushed me into like design when I was pretty young.
No, that's awesome. What I would ask on top of that, as being a woman today in technology, how have you seen that and what can you say in terms of your roots and being different from a young age has helped you in tech as a woman?
Yeah, so well, I think a lot of the ways that it's helped is having a very like interdisciplinary perspective. I always gravitate towards like seeking out knowledge or insights across different disciplines. So like not being necessarily limited to just thinking outside sort of like the common knowledge of your particular domain. Like I've always loved taking things that don't really go together and like putting them together and superimposing them to kind of create something novel in the juxtaposition. So that was something I was always very interested in when I was at Penn, studying design. I would take insights from like writing and literature, and maybe like science classes I was taking or Wharton, and I would mix them in with the design projects I was doing to kind of create something novel. And I think that, maybe pattern of putting disparate things together that don't really go together has served me well. And, being able to kind of look at existing paradigms within the tech, ecosystem or within just our culture or technology as a whole, and being able to kind of think outside the box and find ways of putting things together that don't necessarily belong, in ways that maybe other people don't intuit, in order to like create something new that maybe people thought was impossible, which is kind of what we're doing right now with Ethereal, where we've been my teams has worked within just the app paradigm, like within just trying to create an app that you launch in the app store and you kind of follow sort of the playbook for launching a new product. And we saw a lot of sort of the pitfalls of doing things that way, like how consumers today, like their attention is being fragmented across so many different so many different dominant content platforms already. And so it's actually really really hard to actually have a breakthrough product that directly competes against those existing apps and existing platforms. And so my team was really excited about actually looking outside of the existing paradigms that most entrepreneurs are sort of like gravitating to, and looking at the edge case technologies, looking at these like kind of overlooked technologies that actually allow us to catch people where they already are and bring an experience that actually sort of surprises them and augments what they're already doing, in order to sort of lower the barrier to adoption of a product. So I think, kind of to answer your question in a pretty long-winded way, I think maybe growing up in like a non-traditional way and having a non-traditional background and perspective has helped in tech in the sense of being able to kind of identify opportunity where other people might not. I think it probably hurts as well in different ways, but I think that's the case with all things. You know, there's always kind of a positive and a negative.
No, I really like that answer. I think one of the things that you showcased was being able to take platforms of all different mediums from literature, the arts, and bring it into science and technology and being able to meld those two kind of disciplines
Mhm.
and create something extremely unique. I think that in and of itself shows how your upbringing and your understanding has shaped you in such a unique way. I think that's amazing. And those are the things that a lot of the guests we have on kind of talk about similarly. And
Mhm.
I really appreciate that. Um,
Thank you so much. Also, that was a beautiful, really beautiful way of articulating that. I really appreciate that take.
no, definitely. So tell me this. You were at Penn. You have now graduated. What is Anastasia thinking? 22 years old. Like, what brought you to Miami? You know, what is your young self, fairly young self? You are younger than me. So, uh, thinking at that time and kind of how has this whirlwind gone in the past couple of years since you've gotten into.
Well, so my first experience within tech was actually building like a real world product in Manhattan. So I lived in New York before Miami for about 4 years. And so, you know, this is kind of like my second foray into entrepreneurship. But I don't know. I guess I could talk a little bit about that experience, or I could just kind of focus on like where I am right now with Miami, because it's definitely it's a very special place right now to be building in right now. Like the energy here is absolutely phenomenal. I think it's coming especially from a place like New York. It's a very novel energy because I think New York is very can be a little bit more like close knit and a little bit more exclusive. People don't tend to kind of pull their friends into like disparate sort of social circles. It's a little bit more exclusive. Whereas I think Miami is a great place to be in tech because you'll meet one person and they'll just invite you to something else the next day where you meet a whole other group of their friends, and it kind of follows that sort of domino effect where everybody does that, and so you end up actually feeling like there's like this genuine sense of community where everyone knows each other, everyone brings each other into their circles, and even people I've talked to who have like lived in San Francisco, when it was kind of the go-to place to be, or it was kind of becoming the hub for technology. Those people say like, hey, this actually feels like SF back in the day. So I'm definitely enjoying this part of my life, being here right now.
So what you're saying, that vibe in Miami is very similar to San Francisco in the late 90s, early 2000s, that type of vibe. That's pretty cool.
So I hear. I haven't experienced it. I've only been to California once so far, but from what people tell me who have lived through it, it does appear to be very similar sort of energy and moment in tech here right now.
Nice, nice. I don't want to harp on the past if you don't want to, but kind of tell me just a little bit of overview. Being in New York, working on the company you were, I'm guessing you moved to Miami because that didn't work out. Kind of talk about how you have persevered through those downturns or failures kind of in your life, and what as a new American kind of helped guide you and persevere you to become even better from failure, because I always say failure is the first step to success.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think perhaps, as a new American, I think you aren't willing to like, take no for an answer or take failure as a definitive because you kind of have it, ingrained in you that you have to make things work and you have to succeed. And so I think there's definitely that sort of like underlying grit that constantly keeps me picking myself back up and going like in the face of obstacles and just persevering through all of it. But I mean, I also tend to have a very, like, I suppose a positive way of, kind of analyzing, or maybe do, like, kind of performing a postmortem about an experience. So, rather than kind of thinking of it in a negative light, I focus on like what the experience taught me, and how it actually, was, a stepping stone in the trajectory that's like brought me to what I'm building today. To give a little bit more context of like what happened in the case of, my first product was called More, and I still don't really have closure for that particular product because the timing wasn't right in the sense that we were building a way for people to like connect based on proximity in the real world, and desire for specific experience in Manhattan, in like very late 2019, very early 2020. And so we were in private beta with a group of users who were like pretty small, still in beta, still test users, but they were very engaged and they, had a lot of sort of loyalty to the product. I actually met a lot of my friends in New York City through my own app, which was kind of interesting and kind of nice.
Wow, that's
But
interesting.
yeah, we had just picked up our first pre-seed check from like a star angel, a star investor who had invested in Pinterest and Notion. So we were really, kind of off to the races. And just, a mere 2 months after we picked up our first pre-seed check, when we were kind of gearing up to launch in the App Store, our product became quite literally illegal in Manhattan. It became illegal to actually facilitate people meeting up in person during COVID. And so, that product, did fail due to like circumstances that were, quite literally out of all of our hands. And so, at that point, we, did have a little bit, very small amount of runway, to kind of experiment with like pivoting our product to virtual. But at that point, it was so much the antithesis of what we were building, as kind of real world maximalists that believed that the in person experience is everything. So, we never, in the amount of runway that we had, like, we didn't really end up, finding product market fit before running out of money. And so, like, ultimately we had to shut down. But the key learnings, from that sort of phase of experimentation have very directly funneled into like our insights with our product today with Ethereal. And so I look at that experience and like it's sad that we never got to see that vision through based on like a global pandemic. But I think we learned a lot of things that will ultimately sort of will channel into, delivering upon that original vision in ways like even better and bigger than we were even thinking of when we were building More. So all in all, I think it was a positive experience.
No, that's great. That's exactly what I love to hear. Um, what you're doing is extremely unique. I know what a lot of people say in technology is that technology has driven people further apart. They're glued on their phones. They don't actually interact in the real world. What you have done with the previous company and now today with Ethereal is amazing in the fact that you are trying to bring people together, right? In real life, in the virtual space, both places. And that is something that I think more technology should focus on. Because I think we've read these recent Bloomberg articles that kind of talk about how today's generation, Gen Z and younger, are very lonely, right? Because they're always on the computer. They've gone through the 2 years of isolation and COVID. And so bringing people together is a great endeavor. And I think you're doing an amazing job. Um, for let's say if you had something that you could tell younger listeners, maybe in high school or early college today, that are also new Americans from all over the world living here in the US, what advice would you give them? Because to those people, you're like the wise lady now.
Well, so me, I think there's probably a couple things. One of the things is actually something that I realized, very, very recently, and I think it's worth also noting. It's to embrace, like, embrace the fact that you will have moments of like insecurity, and know that that's normal. If someone's looking at me and thinking, oh, like, if only I could get to that point, but I can't because of X, Y, and Z. Like you should know, like this is something I'm grappling with constantly, is being able to just kind of recognize that like sometimes you'll have imposter syndrome, sometimes you'll fail and you'll pick yourself back up and you'll fail again, or sometimes you think that the things that make you unique or the things that make you different are actually hurting you rather than helping you. Like you'll have all of these moments where you really falter and where like your sense of self is shaken beyond um, like to the point where you think maybe you can't come back from it, but that's normal and that happens to everybody. And I realized this recently because I actually met up for coffee with one of my like long-standing mentors that I met at Penn, who's a professor of mine that originally like I was scared of, that a lot of people were really intimidated by. And I ended up developing a really strong relationship with her over the course of my time at Penn and have stayed in touch since. And I've always seen her as this, sort of someone that I've always like wanted to emulate and wanted to kind of grow into, like, her ability to um, inspire her students or like set them on this really transformative trajectory just by, saying a few words effortlessly, just like the minimalism in her like teaching style I always really admired, and I thought she was brilliant, and she always seemed so unshakable and confident and powerful. And when I had coffee with her recently, I was telling her, forget why, but at some point I was trying to communicate the impact that she's had on my life and how, I'm endlessly still inspired by her, and, how formative her teachings were to me. And I noticed she got really moved. And when I kind of inquired further, it turns out that she had like a recent experience that kind of shook her own sense of self with a student, and
Wow.
made her kind of doubt aspects of her teaching style. And that to me was like so striking because this was someone I thought had like figured it all out. And I thought, hey, you get to a point, as you evolve in your life and as you become more successful or whatever it may be, like you get to a point where you no longer have those like insecurities or you no longer doubt yourself and so on. And seeing the fact that someone who I thought was in that position still experiences that and still has those moments, it made me realize like this, it never goes away. No matter how old you'll be or how successful you'll get or how much like external validation you'll get to point that you're on the right path, I think it's human to have those moments where like your sense of self and your falters and your insecurities kind of get the best of you. So I guess my advice would be like don't put that much don't worry about that as much because it'll never go away, so you might as well embrace it and just recognize it as normal, and just get better at kind of like coping with those moments, the inevitable moments of insecurity like that inevitably will crop up throughout your life.
I think that's great. This is one of the biggest things I always talk about as well. Learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable because you will be put in uncomfortable situations throughout your life. And you have to learn to be comfortable with that. That's when you grow the most as a person. And I think us as new Americans were exposed to that at a very early age, whether it was in kindergarten, first grade. I took English as a second language in first grade when we first moved here when I was 5 years old as well. And so when you go through these things at a very early age, I think it creates this feedback loop to where people like you and I are comfortable being uncomfortable, right? And so those those things I think have helped grow myself into the entrepreneur I am today as well as you. Is there anything more that you kind of want to tell us about yourself, Ethereal, and some final words for the audience?
So I guess one of the things is just kind of tying up what we were just talking about, but just as a word of advice to like anybody watching who might be a little bit apprehensive about, like, let's say, pursuing their entrepreneurial desires or their dreams. I think one of the most important things to keep in mind is to always always take the leap and don't overthink it. As I think, as you've mentioned earlier today in our conversation, failure, you'll, before you become successful, like, you will go through a million different failures. And so, like, each failure isn't necessarily definitive, unless you treat it that way. Like, every failure is just a stepping stone in the trajectory of your journey. And the best way to, like, actually pursue your dreams is to not even worry about the failures, just like accept them as inevitable. And so if you think about it that way, there's nothing stopping you from starting your journey. There's no reason to wait until you're ready, because if you accept that the first thing that you try is probably not going to work out, but that's how it's supposed to go, you gotta rush towards that failure as quickly as possible, so that you can learn and you can kind of pursue that trajectory towards something that's actually gonna work out. So I don't know, I guess my piece of advice is, never wait, always kind of push yourself. I forget what it is, but there is this sort of advice where, like, you have to impulsively push yourself to, like, go outside of your comfort zone before you have a chance to overthink it. So, like, even if you're at an event, and you want to talk to new people or meet new people, but you feel a little bit awkward, don't overthink it. Give yourself like 2 seconds and just push yourself. Make your, like, start moving towards the person before you have a chance to, like, get nervous about it or get scared. And so I think, like, that's really valuable advice for everything you do, is don't kind of spend so much time prophesizing and overthinking things. Like, actually, just, you have like a kernel of insight, pursue it, and it might not work out, but you iterate towards something that will. So I guess that's maybe like what I'd want to end with.
No, that's great. I think, going forward and just doing it, the Nike logo, just do it.
Yeah.
Easiest way to put it. I really like that. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you for coming on. For those of you watching that are accredited investors, reach out. Ethereal is doing their pre-seed round. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if any of you are interested, for those of you who are part of the Gala Investment Syndicate that are interested as well, feel free to reach out to me. We'll throw something on Instagram as well. And we'll get you out the deck and we'll have a conversation. Thank you, Anastasia.
Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much, Ian, for having me.
Thanks. Take care. Hey guys, another great episode of the New American Media Podcast. We had Anastasiya Shekhtman on, originally born in Ukraine. As we know, there is a conflict going on there. I spoke with her. We really didn't want to bring it up because it's extremely personal for her, but be aware that there is a conflict going on there right now. And, these are the things that we really don't talk about growing up. Is a lot of new Americans come from areas of the world that are conflict zones and still are able to be successful and persevere. One of the greatest examples you see it today is in one of my idols that I look up to, and where we met at the All In Summit, is Chamath Palihapitiya, right? He is of Sri Lankan descent, and the Sri Lankan government today, or a couple of days ago, just overthrew the president of Sri Lanka. And you see that when you're given the personal freedoms that we have in the United States to flourish, to learn, to be successful, just by having safety, the access to food, shelter, and other basic human life needs. Um, New Americans and all types of immigrants are able to flourish and succeed. And that's kind of been the thesis for a lot of these episodes. I think Anastasia encapsulates all of those things. And I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. Stay tuned for next week. Thank you, everyone. Take care.